Just had a conversation with Rick Ciratella from NFL Draft Bible over the last couple days. We carved through all the positions, both sides of the ball. Ohio State will not have any wide receivers that place extremely high. Of course, Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin showed themselves pretty well, especially McLaurin at the next level, their rookie seasons. KJ Hill is the all-time receptions leader at Ohio State, but he's down the board, as is Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor. And Bedevil 11 asking if Benjamin Victor is going to get drafted. I would think no.
Good question. I think Victor and Mack are iffy for the late rounds. I don't know. I mean, both of them have some tremendous upside, I think. I think Hill's dependable, but I'm not sure he has the spark to be a second or third round pick, but maybe a middle round pick. I don't know. I'm open on those guys. I think, Mack just could never be healthy at Ohio State. Victor was just so inconsistent at Ohio State. You just never knew what you were going to get out of him one game to the next. And I think he played some really good football his last year, I think. And that Penn State game from 2 years ago was probably the play of his whole college career. But I don't know. Inconsistent and injuries, just don't – I mean, you have to test really, really well to overcome that. And I'm not sure they're going to do that. So obviously, no pro day now. And the NFL, the NFL waits for no man or no virus. They are moving straight ahead, and they don't care. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes made in this draft, I would think.
Yeah. Who does it benefit not having the pro days and having the workouts, the individual workouts and whatnot? Does it, are some of those hidden gems out there, maybe at the smaller schools, do they not get seen? Do these NFL teams kind of default back to programs that they're familiar with? I mean, obviously, if you're coming in and you've been keeping an eye on the Chase Youngs and the Jeff Okudas of the world, you're going to know the Ohio State personnel well. You're going to know the Alabama personnel well. You're going to know them. So, the NFL certainly does every little thing they can to analyze and go frontwards and backwards and sideways. So, I'm not expecting them to just sit there and go all willy-nilly and just pick, foolishly, but, there could be a benefit for big schools. Schools that are highly scouted in these types of situations, just out of familiarity, breeding some sort of being comfortable.
Yeah, and I had a scout tell me that the teams will just have to rely on the scouts more, rely on the tape and less on the pro day. So they're happy about that, because then, as long as they're right, if they're wrong, then it's not going to look so great when teams had to put so much stock in what the scouts are telling them, and then they go out and draft guys who look good on tape, but then you get them into your facility and they're running a 4.82 as a wideout. And that's an area where Austin Mack and Ben Victor, as Steve said, both those guys needed to show good times. And I don't know that any of them, including KJ Hill, are more than a 4.6 guy. And KJ Hill at least is able to get open, and he was able to get open and impress the scouts at what the Senior Bowl and things like that, where he'd catch everything, do everything right, dependable. And I think nobody is under the illusion that he's an outside guy. Everybody sees him as a dependable slot. What does that make? Fourth or fifth round, I would assume, for teams who are looking for that, and maybe you slide down even from there. But for outside guys like Ben Victor and Austin Mack, they've got good size. And Ben Victor, I think, benched 225 about 9 times at the combine, so that's not great. Ohio State had better guys or more productive guys than those two over the years while they were playing, but it just didn't seem like they could get, like when Garrett Wilson, his freshman year, he came in and teamed with Ben Victor at the X, and there was it looked like Garrett Wilson very much belonged and did not lessen the position. He raised the position. Chris Olave did the same thing at the Z, where these young guys made the position better, and they were teaming and partnering with Mack and Victor. So, when you look back in history at those two, they would compare probably less favorably than like Brian Hartline and Brian Robisky. When those two were together, like a tandem like that, they would be below that, well below Santonio Holmes and Ted Ginn. Just never quite gave what they expected. Even you guys remember Austin Mack was really good as a true freshman spring. He lit it up as a true freshman in spring, and you're like, whoa. And then that wasn't his peak, but I guess it was kind of a tease. And as Steve said, injuries have never been kind to him.
I'm thinking that just by looking at Benjamin Victor, that if he bench pressed 225 9 times, I'm guessing that's about 9 more times than he did it when he arrived on campus, because he was like a beanpole.
And was never able to get.
I was going to say, you got to remember too, though, how long he is and everything else. Covering, putting 225 up and down 9 times is probably the distance of a normal receiver doing it 13 or 14 times, just because of that. But yeah, I had the chance to cover him in high school. We went down to his high school in South Florida and talked to him then, and it certainly was a situation where you thought once he got into a nutrition program and was getting a lot more calorie intake, that he would put on weight, but he's just got one of those metabolisms that certainly I don't have right now. Maybe I did back in the day, but not like that now.
Jeffrey Okudah has certainly distanced himself from the field. He is like the lockdown D guy at corner, and it's a decent cornerback class from guys from Alabama, Florida, LSU right behind him, but he is the consensus number 1 corner, top 3 or 4 player in the country.
And a guy you start from day one, I would assume, outside even. Sometimes you draft these first-round corners late in the draft or late in the first round to, put them in the slot like the Denver did with Bradley Roby a few years back. But Okudah is a guy you just plug in, and you better, because you're taking him that high. Now, I've seen a lot of talk where Detroit might try to trade out of that number 3 spot and maybe still get him, or maybe get Isaiah Simmons. But there's a track record there for guys drafted that high, cornerbacks at Ohio State drafted that high. And, how many better corners have we seen at Ohio State just in the last, 10 or 15 years? I don't know. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore was really, really good, but he was a one-year wonder. Okudah's put in more time.
Yeah, talking about Detroit, I mean, they could try to slide down to 5 or 6 and still be able to get him, as somebody might want to move up for Tua. But Detroit really made its lot when it dumped one of its other corners to sit there and show that they really needed to add a corner, and Okudah makes sense. And if I were wagering, which I'm not very good at, I would still say Okudah lands at 3 to Detroit, because they can't take that chance. I mean, Isaiah Simmons is a hell of a consolation prize, but they absolutely need an A1 corner right now.
The Lions, you think they might do something wrong?
They could draft another receiver again, but that goes back to the Matt Millen days.
Exactly. He's not around anymore.
If
there was a GM that I would never have flagged to be the guy that would draft a wide receiver every year, it was Matt Millen, who's blood and guts, line play, but he was drafting Mike Williams and all sorts of receivers every year.
I would expect, we're going to go get Paul Posluszny.
Sure.
We're going to go get, Go ahead,
the world is going to turn on its axis when the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns play in the Super Bowl. Neither of them have ever been. And we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone one of these years, probably 30 years after I'm dead and gone. But
so the lightning's going to strike at once in both conferences at the same time.
Yes. So talking about Okudah and corner, I mean, of course, there's a lot of people who are writing a lot about the history of Ohio State football right now with the hiatus and position lists and all-time this and all-time that. But cornerback has been, and I've got a list of the former starters here. I mean, back to Antoine Winfield and Sean Springs in the 90s, it's been a great position at Ohio State down through the years. Nate Clements played in the NFL for a while.
Ahmed Plummer.
Yeah,
right
Ahmed
around that
Plummer
time.
was drafted. Chris Gamble played in the NFL for about 10 years. He was really good, and he was a wide receiver originally at OSU, and in 2002 played both. Dustin Fox was a starting corner on their national championship team. He had a cup of coffee in the NFL as well. Ashton Yabodi, Malcolm Jenkins. Man, he arrived, and he reminded people of Antoine Winfield when he arrived because he was the nickelback as a freshman, kind of like Winfield was in 95. And then he took over as a starter for the following 3 seasons, kind of like Winfield did, and was outstanding. Donald Washington, how about him and the trouble he got into at various times in his career? And then that kind of winds down the Tressel era, Chimdi Chekwa and guys like that. Then you get into the more what the younger kids now call BIA, best in America. Everybody else can be DBU, but when you got Duran Grant and you got Eli Apple and Tyvis Powell at safety and so on and so forth, and Garyon Conley and Marshawn Lattimore, everybody else can be DBU. Von Bell, Ohio State, they're on their own platform. They're BIA. And don't let anybody forget it. I mean, and especially BIA now that Kerry Combs is back at Ohio State. So the New Orleans Saints are bullish on Ohio State Buckeyes, although Bell and Apple are both out of there now, but Lattimore, I guess, still there. But it's been a crazy run for Ohio State in the secondary.
I think at one point, Kerry Combs, maybe by the time he left, all of his starting corners were either all Big Ten first team or first rounders.
Yeah.
Including like Travis Howard in 2012 and 2013, who was a all Big Ten, but I don't think he was drafted or maybe in like the 7th round, but just a litany of guys, even though they don't all pan out in the NFL, they did okay at Ohio State, so, and I think I think they'll take that kind of performance, all Big Ten corners year in and year out. And then it's up to them to perform in the NFL. And we've seen, Garyon Conley, I believe, has already been traded from the Raiders or went somewhere else. And so they still have some proving to do. We know Eli Apple, that gets criticized quite a bit and wherever he goes. But I think, Jeff Okudah, from the time he arrived, before then, he was viewed as a different level than those guys. Yeah,
no question. And I think Raiders fans were rejoicing when the Conley signing, or not Conley, but Apple, when the Apple signing didn't go through, they were kind of halfway rejoicing. But I guess we'll have to see how where he lands and how it ends up.
We all grew up during a time watching football when you had to have that guy at running back, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Jerome Bettis. We could go through the litany of great running backs in the NFL. Tony Dorsett, Franco Harris are the first couple guys that I remember. And then we hit that period when the passing game blew up, and it has in stages since the 70s, but more recently, 10 to 15 years ago, where the running back became the combination of the passing game blowing up and a number of running back busts, and that position became a just grab a guy, and we need the offensive lineman to create space, but we just need a running back. It doesn't really matter who it is. And then the performance and the excellence from Zeke Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry kind of changed that, where we've seen some first-round running backs in recent years. So it'll be interesting, of course, to see where J.K. Dobbins lands and how much he's valued and if he sneaks into the first round.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate. I think he was a player that really could have used a good pro day performance on top of the combine. I think going into the combine, he was probably the number 1 back on a lot of boards right now. A lot of the mocks I look at now have him number 3 behind DeAndre Swift of UGA and Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. A lot of the mocks I look at still don't have a first round grade on any of the backs. I've seen a couple with Swift going late first, but I think he's going to be somebody in Dobbins. I know Miami seems to like him a good amount. Maybe in the second round there. I see him in the 50s, maybe early 60s. But I think whatever team gets him is going to get a great value. But yeah, the shelf life on backs are so short right now that teams are not putting a huge emphasis there. I mean, you look at the Todd Gurley situation with the LA Rams, sign him to the big deal, and then just have to basically cut him. I don't think you're going to see. I think that's where the trend's going to be right now.
Yeah, I see second round, unless somebody trades up to get him late in the first, because that's who they targeted. But you wonder when he will do a virtual pro day and show what he can do, because his ankle is still jacked up for the combine. But because there's times where I've talked to his high school coach a couple of years ago, and he hand timed him at a 4.30, which he said, so that's probably like a 4.45 laser or something like that. And if he could go ahead and do that, because I personally don't see DeAndre Swift or the LSU kid being better than him, because every field that J.K. Dobbins was on this past year, he was the best running back, arguably the best player, and that's Jonathan Taylor twice. And he was a guy who got better the more you gave it to him, and he wants the ball more, but is also not a selfish player. So he's a good locker room guy in that way. He can catch the ball, even though I know people want to criticize him for what happened in the Clemson game. He's a guy that can be used all over the field. He's 3 downs. He may be short or whatever, but he never played small. And I think he's a guy who instantly helps your team. But again, as you said, Mark, how valuable are running backs now when seemingly everybody has almost gotten to the point of, remember when the Denver Broncos could just throw anybody in there and they'd run for 1,500 yards. It didn't matter. And now, if you've got 2 guys who can give you 700 yards, do you need to spend one of those on a first or a second round pick? Probably not. That's why, who are the difference makers? Are they the guys you can't pass up on? And so you take them, and then everybody else just falls behind that. And, second, third, fourth round, if they fall, they fall. We can get them then. And if we can't get J.K. Dobbins, we'll get guys, instead of our number 2 running back, we can get our number 5 running back 2 rounds later.